an essential takeaway from some of these conversations that we've had is how when you have a prose work that isn't working exactly, how you'll disrupt it in some way. I've seen that very often reading this, where a scene will kind of play out and it'll play out to the point of ambiguity, and then Elaine Shore will pop in, or some other metaphysical aberration that will cut it off, and a new story will be told.
Yeah.
And that works within this book because of how metaphysical it is and how there's always a strain between the author and the creation of Manny Cole.
There were about maybe a dozen times that Elaine Shaw pops in. Of that, say 12, maybe it's 10, but let's say it's 12. Of that 12, 8 or 9 of them were deliberately that way. And then there were 3 or 4 times where I could have gone on, but I said no, because I could have made this a 3 million word book rather easily if I wanted to. But I held back and I said it's better to leave the thread dangling. So instead of doing that, I'd say, here comes Elaine Shaw to chop it up. Sometimes, for example, a couple of chapters start or end, with Manny didn't finish the chapter. Those are obvious ones. Then there are a few other times where she pops in, as I said, where I could have gone on, but I said, no, let me just have Elaine pop in and end this here.
Let's move on to the trailer element, and the book also ends with deleted scenes. So it begins with trailers and teasers, and then ends with deleted scenes, which heightens the ambiguity.
Well, and it should be said, so people looking at this in 100 years after DVDs have gone the way of the dinosaur, this is a turn of the century DVD Blu-ray kind of culture, and so this book is very much a product of its time. It was written in 2013 to 2014, over 17 months. To the day, February 16th, 2013 to July 16th, 2014. And so it has the trailers. It is so indebted to film. This is a perfect example of fiction that's totally indebted to film. You hear a lot of people talk about fiction writing, prose writing that's very filmic, and most of it is just bullshit. It's shit that they make a little allusion here or there. This is thoroughly drenched in film, and from the trailers to the deleted scenes at the end. So go ahead. Oh, before we do ask that, let me just ask you. I told you when you read the Vincetti Brothers. When I finished reading the Vincetti Brothers, I said it was the greatest novel ever written. When I finished this book, I said it's the greatest book ever written, not just the greatest novel, but the greatest book, and probably the greatest artwork and greatest single work done by anyone ever. And I put it, I think, in an email to someone. It might not have been you. That I said that the spy book that I just finished, I think, is better than the Vincetti Brothers. Because of its length, it can't be as great a work as this book, but it's almost 300,000 words, is compressed to a point where it's probably the most brilliant writing that I've done. But I would ask, was I correct? Do you think that there's any prose work that you ever read that comes close to A Norwegian in the Family?
I think Norwegian in the Family is a different kind of novel. I would say that the comparison to the Super 7, I have not read it, would not be a good one to act. You may say that there's no 300,000 word sequence in Norwegian that equals Super 7, but if you have a different kind of novel, and let's say that it's a 95 out of 100 on this different scale, that eclipses anything that comes to perfection at 300,000 words.
Yeah,
so
well, I'm saying
like
a Norwegian is a
beast. It's like a new species emerged with this book.
Yeah, a Norwegian in the Family.
It surpasses Vincetti in every single way.
Yeah, but A Norwegian in the Family, if this was the only thing that I'd ever done, I could still make a claim that I'm the greatest writer that ever lived. If, like Proust's book is a little more than half the size of this, and it has maybe 300,000. It has maybe about 300 pages of great writing out of 3,300. This book doesn't have any dry spots like that. You may not like, for example, when Bit goes back and forth to Dennis Hopper's apartment and Dennis Hopper slips over the railing in his own urine, kind of thing, happening a dozen times or more. But this book is without. There's no artwork that even is with apparel, because it has the meta techniques. It uses, and one of the reasons that I decided to use a lot of the stuff was I wanted to show the very importance of having influence, acknowledging influence, and especially with public domain works. This book is the greatest argument for the public domain that there could be.
I was talking to Jessica about some of the extraneous public domain material, and I noticed, especially reading chapter 54, how just like a film, it condenses. So all of a sudden, you're instantly able to read so many pages at a time because of how the prose condenses. You may notice a word or so that's different, but it is like one of those films like in Bellatar or The Angelopoulos, but just taken to a completely different level of how so much condenses in such a short
And
frame of time.
Bellatar and Angelopoulos are also huge influences filmically here. Without a doubt, Bellatar's films were first an influence on the Vincetti brothers, and here especially, his Satan Tango is a good example of an influence on here too.
Yeah, Andrei Tarkovsky is also a good analog, and maybe Michelangelo Antonioni as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the trailer element. They're very well chosen. They don't have any kind of into what exactly occurs and how it occurs, but it kind of whets the appetite just as a good trailer would do. It's more in line with the 1970s kind of trailers than it is now, where it's just promotion. But it's a good strain there, and it's very effective how the trailers and teasers bookend with the deleted scenes, and that shows the whole filmic technique wrought very well. I think it too gives hints of all the individual characters with the first teasers and trailers, and then there's intermissions in between as well to kind of give breaks, but also set up epigraphs to use later on with the prose that readers can imbue with and integrate into the later stuff, and perhaps before as well.